Welcome to Planet Word. We are the only museum in the country dedicated to renewing and inspiring a love of words, language, and reading. And I don't know about you all, but right about now that feels pretty darn significant. Do we agree? Definitely need that. So my name is Britt Oates. I'm the manager of public programs, and on behalf of myself and the entire Planet Word crew, we're super excited to welcome you to today's programming event. This is Between the Lines with Jason Reynolds and Lawrence Burney. And today's program will include a discussion between Jason and Lawrence, followed by a brief Q&A. Now, before I do our proper introduction of our esteemed guest today, I do want to talk a little bit about Jason Reynolds and this special programming series. So Jason is a dear friend to Planet Word. He sits on our board of advisors and is featured in our Poetry Nook experience in our library on the second floor. Jason has partnered with Planet Word in the development of the Between the Lines series, which gives us a rare opportunity to sit in on in-depth conversations between Jason and his close friends that spotlight Black representation in the literary arts and showcases writers and educators who are using the written word as a means of personal expression and social change. In their conversations, Jason and his friends tap into everything from hip-hop, culture, storytelling, and so much more. And today we're really excited because we're actually kicking off the second season of Between the Lines with Jason Reynolds, and today, Lawrence Burney. Now, I'm gonna go ahead and do a proper intro, right? Because we wanna give these kings their flowers before they come out. So, Jason Reynolds is the #1 New York Times best-selling author of more than 20 books for children and young adults. He is best known for his novels All American Boys, co-written with Brendan Keeley, the Track series, and Long Way Down, which received Newbery, Prince, and Coretta Scott King honors. Among Jason's many accolades, he was named the National Ambassador for Young People's Literature by the Library of Congress for 2020 through 2022. And he's also a 2024 MacArthur Fellow. He's on faculty at Lesley University for the Writing for Young People MFA program, and he lives right here in Washington, D.C. You can find his ramblings, of course, at jasonwritesbooks.com. Lawrence Burney is a writer, critic, and the founder of True Laurels, an independent magazine covering Baltimore's music and culture scene. His work has appeared in publications such as New York Magazine, GQ, and Pitchfork. He has also worked at The Fader, Vice, and the Baltimore Banner. No Sense in Wishing is his first book, y'all. Make some noise for that, right? Limited supply available for purchase in the Present Perfect gift shop in the lobby. And you can follow Lawrence on Instagram and on X at True Laurels. So y'all, please join me in giving all the love to Jason Reynolds and Lawrence Burney.
It's good to see everybody. I'm Jason. I want to just real quick get a couple other things out the way. How many of people here have been to Between the Lines? If you've been to this event before, put your hand in the air. A handful of y'all. That's good. So here's what this is. Furthermore, let me say what it's not. This is not a book event. That's not what this is going to be. I'm sure we're going to talk about the book some, but the truth is that I just had the desire to talk to my friends in front of other people. So like you, and these are just people that I'm interested in, and I think there's value in the conversations you have with the people that you're interested in, and you all get to just kind of sit here and be nosy, basically. Right. The other thing about these events is that I usually start off with a theme, like just a word that I like to put into the air, whatever it is I'm feeling at the moment, specifically sort of rooted around the person in which I'm talking to. So for today's Between the Lines, I think the word is going to be balance. I don't know how this plays into the conversation, but it always somehow tends to make its way in whatever I decide the word to be. So today the word is balance. I could use a little. And Lawrence, as you'll see, is like some people just stay on 5. Right, on a scale of 1 to 10, right? The best people are the ones who are on 5. Right? He a 5er, you know what I mean? And so if your cortisol levels are up, they finna come down, you know what I mean? All right. So my first question, Lawrence. My first question is, brother, why does Baltimore hate DC so badly? I think we need to get to the root of the issue. I think enough is enough. It's been 50 years of a strange hatred between these two cities. And I'd like to know. The other thing I don't know is if parts of Baltimore that are white hate the parts of D.C. that are white. We've never discussed that part of it. If it's cultural, if it's sort of like, is it segregated culturally or not? But can you please explain?
I actually don't think Baltimore hates D.C. I think D.C.
Hates
hates Baltimore.
Oh, boy. Yeah, that's crazy. Is that what you think?
I think so.
You think we hate y'all?
I don't think it's hate. I don't think it's
hate. So then why
I don't
do you think DC hate Baltimore? Let's put you really in the hot seat. Now remember where you at. You know what I'm saying?
I know where I am.
Okay.
Go is amazing. I like mumbo sauce. I don't think that's hate. I think it's just a friendly rivalry. It's 45 minutes to an hour away. I just think it's such a small region that people get super territorial. I mean, even without Baltimore, I'm on the internet a lot. DC is so territorial about what is DC and what's not that Baltimore don't even stand a chance. You could be from PG and the DC person will be like, "You ain't from DC.
You're not from DC." That's
so
true.
I stand no chance in that debate. I love my people from DC. I feel like the past 10 years of my life, honestly, has been kind of spreading that love to the whole region. I obviously started out very Baltimore focused. But I think very quickly I started to realize, like, hey, I mean, they're right down the road. Why wouldn't I be coming down here and talking to the artists who are doing great things, the people that inspire me? And I honestly, I focus on more of the similarities than the differences. I think it's actually a lot of overlap, but because it's so small and they're both distinct metro areas, people tend to look at the things that pull us apart. But I love it here. I enjoy it.
I think it's special, man. I feel the same way. Part of my own story was as a 16, 17-year-old, I would go up the Parkway on Wednesday nights up on Charles Street. I had that Ethiopian restaurant, Five Seasons. And that's where a lot of us had to go and get
open mics.
The open mics. I had to go, and I was up there, and Baltimore always showed me. The only reason I even started publishing books is because I met a woman in Baltimore who taught me how to do so as a teenager. Shout out to Maisha Cherry. Yeah, so I got love for y'all, you know what I'm saying? I don't really, and now I feel like the whole world is turned on and has stolen y'all music and claims it as something else. Shout out to Detroit and Chicago, of course, but Baltimore club music, Jersey claiming it. They say it's theirs. Philly got a version of it. They say it's theirs. But I feel like the one point of pride I do have for y'all where I'm like, nah, dog, that's theirs, right?
It's ours. I think it's gotten so... I mean, obviously, I think Baltimore clubs started to trail off with the death of K-Swift. If anybody's familiar, K-Swift was like a super instrumental figure in the Baltimore club scene. She was a DJ, and she put together these compilation tapes in the 2000s that just showcased a lot of the youth culture in the city. She hosted parties, all the high school parties. The Paradox of people, if anybody is familiar with that, she was a big proponent of that space. And I think when she passed in a tragic accident in 2008, she was kind of the engine that was making sure club music didn't die. I think a lot of the radio had pressure on the club music DJs. They wanted to be more appealing to outside markets or just people that weren't just into house or electronic forms of music. So once she passed, I think a lot of it trailed off with her. And I think Jersey took the mantle right at the perfect intersection of time when social media really took off. Yeah. So I think they got to claim that a little harder because they took off at that time.
Were you in that scene? Did you go to the Paradox or did you do the club?
I mean, I went to the Docks a couple of times. I was more like the high school parties. Yeah. The high school parties where K-Swift hosted them. Yeah. And Black Star, if anybody's familiar.
Yeah, Jamal.
His mother and my grandmother were very close friends when I was growing up. So
for those of y'all who don't know Jamal, he was responsible for a lot of that MIA stuff that came out in the early yards, all that Sainty Gold stuff that was happening. He had his hand in a lot of that music.
For sure. Especially like the Collar album of MIA's. And the one before that I'm not remembering right now. But yeah, I think Jersey just kind of picked up the mantle when social media really took the world by storm. I think they obviously benefit from the proximity to New York City.
Clay, I want to talk a bit. I want to stay here for a second because I think So I've never been to the docks, but the way it was always described to me is the same way that a place like the Black Hole, so I'm talking to a specific sect of DC at this moment, where a place like the Black Hole or the Ibex or the Icebox or these sort of spaces for go-go's in the 90s and early 2000s were where it was sort of, or like Dave Grohl from the Foo Fighters talks about this on this documentary, I think it's called Highway to Heaven or something like that, where he talks about, he grew up across the bridge, and he talks about coming into DC and going and seeing.
I think I saw that.
Yeah, going and seeing like Sugar Bear or somebody, right? And he talks about like what it was like to see all these black kids sort of in this particular space having what almost seemed to be a spiritual experience, right? Like the music gets talked about in different ways now because noise ordinances and things that just didn't exist, right? And instead it was like these spaces for us to go to express ourselves. And did it get a little spicy sometimes? Yes. Did it get a little slippery sometimes? Yes, right? But beyond the sort of negative stereotypes of that, it was also a place where you can go and get free, where you can go and have your name called. You can go and have your neighborhood's name called. You can go and have your crew's name called. Where you can see your friends, or you can see your homie from across town, or you can see your heroes who were the lead talkers in these go-go bands or the Congo players in these bands. My peoples from Baltimore talk about how Paradox was very much like a ring shout. It's like you go and it feels very spiritual, almost like an ecstaticism, right? Like that one might find in the black church. And so can you talk a bit about like what it was for young people? And it was like a late club, like 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning.
I think it stayed open till 6. Actually,
for teenagers, which is...
Yeah, but it wasn't a teen.
Wow,
it wasn't a teen.
Where was y'all up? What was going on, son?
It wasn't a teen club, but they had teen nights.
But that was still open till 6?
But it was still, it was open till 6. And it was...
Where y'all mothers was at, dog?
It was also massive. Like, it was a basketball court inside of it. Like, you could actually hoop inside the club. It was multiple parts of it. It was outside. It was a big warehouse.
Yeah.
Right down near the stadium.
So, like, what is that music in those spaces? What did it mean for young Baltimore?
I think it meant everything. I think, especially around the time, it's multiple generations of club music. I would say by the time I was coming of age, it was probably on its 3rd generation. It started in the late 90s, the late 80s, early 90s. And in those early days, you could hear more of the Chicago house and the Miami bass and the drum and bass out of London. You could hear those elements a little more clearly. By the time it got to my coming of age in the mid to late 2000s, we had our own distinctive sound where Baltimore club, which I think distinguishes it from the other forms of club music that branched off from it. It has hooks and verses. It obviously has mixes and stuff like that. But the early days, I would say, is very close to go-go. In the early 90s, it was a lot of call and response. It was a lot of, almost all the big songs were shouting out neighborhoods. We had this artist named Miss Tony.
Shout out Miss Tony. I just saw a picture of Miss Tony the other day.
Yeah, it was a new picture that kind of surfaced. Yeah, I saw that. Miss Tony is credited with being the first artist to regularly MC over club music tracks. First, it was very DJ producer forward, and Tony was already a fixture in the nightlife, specifically the black queer nightlife in Baltimore, like the ballroom culture. And the ballroom culture is all about call and response and hyping people up as they're dancing. So I think Tony was already a major figure in the clubs, and people would pay Tony to shout their neighborhood out or shout their birthday out and all that kind of stuff. So if you listen to, Living in the Alley or Pull Your Guns Out or EA, or even a song, Hey You Knuckleheads by an artist named Big Rhea, those songs are just shouting out neighborhoods. It's to honor the people who are in the party. And I think that's the intersection between go-go and club music. Yeah. But by the time I came of age, it was more like dance-oriented. So it was a dance with almost every song. We had like the SpongeBob or the Slide to the Left or the Crazy Legs. And I didn't know how to do none of those dances. I was like on the wall.
Because I was never about to be like, I think you should probably. No, I'm just kidding.
I'm not that loose in my limbs. But I think it was more youth culture driven by the time I came around. I think it was probably adult nightlife in the beginning, and I think people like K Swift helped shift the culture to youth culture, which I think probably kept it alive for probably at least another decade. Yeah. I think maybe adults probably would have found something different that they liked. But kids, you know, not only was it the soundtrack to the house party, the school parties, it would be the basement parties, what we call freak parties, if you are aware. It would be the freak parties, or and they would play it for hours on the radio also, and people would tape it, and that's how you would get the house parties. People would tape the mixes that were on the radio. So yeah, I think it was everything. Yeah. It was everything, and it was so insulated that I didn't know that wasn't a thing other places. I'm sure people down this way felt the same way about go-go. It's like you go somewhere else and you think people might know about this music, and they just don't.
They just don't. No, they definitely do not. Yeah. We're going to talk about your writing in a second, but I like talking to you about Baltimore because I know you love it. And I think what has happened to Baltimore, the way people talk about Baltimore, like people talk about Baltimore like they talk about Detroit, right? People are like, man, Detroit, man, it's a lost city. And then you be like, you ever been to Detroit? They're like, nah, I ain't never been to Detroit, right? And so it's this interesting sort of, like I always say, Baltimore is the victim of poor branding. Right?
I say that all the time. I say we have some of the worst PR.
That's it.
We have horrible
crazy.
PR.
Baltimore, because if you've ever spent time in Baltimore, if you know people from Baltimore, and you talking about good folk, salt of the earth people, like, oh, it's interesting, right? We play around with the whole Baltimore, DC, blah, 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 blah. But first of all of us have been up and through Baltimore, right? And so it's impossible to deny, especially as DC continues to change, right? So
a lot of your folks is in Baltimore right now.
A lot of my folks
people from
is in
down
Baltimore
this way
because they can't afford to live here no more. And so we looking up the Parkway, and it's like, look like Chocolate City up there, right? And everybody, right? And so it's an interesting sort of cultural exchange that's happening, and it's complicated for lots of reasons. But I do want to ask, man, if you could create a slogan. So we got Baltimore, the city that reads, which I think was a terrible slogan, by the way.
Terrible.
I think we got Charm City, which I don't.
Like that one.
Yeah, as I said, which I don't hate. I don't hate because it does have that, right? We got Charm City, which of course has been terribly misappropriated to Harm City and all this other nonsense. So if you, and I know this is on the spot, so if you can't do it, you can think about it throughout the rest of this talk and we'll come back. But I want, if you could, if you had to sort of create a tagline for a misunderstood place, what would it be?
I think Baltimore is refreshingly weird. You know, I just think it's a very eccentric place. Like, I think most people you meet there are kind of kooky.
Yeah.
But in a cool way. It's not off-putting. I mean, it can be off-putting at times.
Yeah, it can be.
But I do think it's just one of those cities because it's so insulated. It's for the longest time. I think if you think about, if you want to call it the Northeast Corridor, it would be what you consider like a flyover city. So I think there isn't as much connectivity with the other places. I mean, it is, but I think we've been left to our own devices for a long time, and I think insulated places get to develop their own really interesting, quirky culture. Like, I don't think you get a John Waters if he was from
Shout out to John Waters.
Wilmington, Delaware, or no shade to Wilmington, Delaware. I'm just saying, like, I just don't think you get that kind of character from another place, because you can kind of be who you want to be, and not in the way that people say it about New York, where you can be who you want to be because you kind of can walk down the street and nobody really pays you much attention. But I think in Baltimore, people have been kind of left to their own devices for a long time, and it creates this really dynamic energy there. But yeah, I think it's a place where artists can be artists, which is not a lot of places left.
One of the
like
last
that.
places.
It's one of the last places where artists can just kind of be an artist and not fully conform, you know? Like, I think a lot of people in New York obviously can live the artist lifestyle, but most of them probably work a job that they don't talk about.
Or two
that they don't talk about. Or I would imagine a lot of
people, they live with 18 people.
Yeah. I would imagine, I mean, and Baltimore has this as well, but I would imagine maybe an artist in D.C. might have a government job. And hopefully, yeah, maybe.
Man, ain't too much of that going on either, bro.
Not these days, but like historically speaking, I would say maybe people have more conventional ways of living. And it's not that that doesn't exist in Baltimore also, but I know a lot of people who just are artists.
When I first started going up there, I was surprised about how many people own stores.
Yeah.
I said, so all of y'all just own, this whole street is just y'all boutiques. Everybody got like a
25th
clothing
Street.
store, a photography studio. I'm like, oh, y'all just got stores up here. You know Miles Arelli? Oh, yeah, he an older cat. He probably like 50 now, but he wear like crazy clothes and ride BMXs and skateboards and all. Anybody know Miles? Of y'all Baltimore people? See? He like a Baltimore superstar. He like a legend.
Maybe I know him and don't know his name.
Yeah. Anyway, but he's the example of what you can be, what you can be in Baltimore City.
For sure.
You know I
think that's the appeal of people who are moving there from here, or people who are moving there from. I mean, it's people moving there from all over now, especially black people, which I think is an interesting dynamic that I didn't grow up knowing. You don't meet I met a lot of white folks who were moving to Baltimore from other places. Maybe they were retained from like Micah or Towson or Hopkins, because Baltimore has like a big hardcore punk scene that would retain those folks, but they're really insulated in their own world. And now I would say over the past 7 years or so, I'm encountering a lot of black people who are moving from other cities because they see there's a majority black place.
Yeah.
You can buy property, you can have a business. So I'm interested in what that will result in. Because
you look a little concerned, my brother.
Of course I am.
You look a little worried.
Of course I am.
You should be. But listen, you should be, man. I want to talk about the writing because I'm also curious, and we've talked about this in the past. You know, I look at sort of my own life. I look at sort of my friends and people who have come from different neighborhoods and different environments in this particular area, and it's like, look, if writing was a thing that was, it strapped the jetpack to my back in a very different way, and it allowed me to leave, and it allowed me to see. Right, a world much bigger than my neighborhood, a world much bigger than this area, and then it allowed me to come back and then see this all differently as well, and then say, oh yeah, you know what I mean? And so I want to talk about what writing did, how that happened, where it came from, what sparked it. I'm always curious about people's origin stories when it comes to the hardest possible craft a person could choose.
I think it's funny. My mother is here.
Shout out to Mom.
She's also a writer, but she, I think, wanted me to be a writer.
Is this true? We could just ask her. Did you?
I didn't know that he was going to be a writer. I knew he was capable of writing, but I didn't know that was going to be his chosen profession. But I knew the talent was there.
I love your mother's voice, by the way. Fire.
She got radio voice.
She got one of them voices.
She got Quiet Storm voice. I didn't give in to those desires until probably college age.
The desire to write?
The desire to write. I think I had a class in high school, a college writing class. I had a teacher named Mr. McBee. And when I was in high school, I was in trouble a lot of behavior stuff and a lot of just acting out, not really doing the school thing. Just school was very social for me. I enjoyed the social aspect of school.
Same.
And that's kind of where it ended for me. But I had a teacher named Mr. McBee who I probably had the most contentious relationship with him out of any teacher. Like, we had physical altercations, so on and so forth. But we had these assignments where we had to write essays, and I wish I saved them. But we had to write essays, and I noticed that I was getting A's and B's on my essays, and I wasn't an A and B student. So I'm like, if this guy who feels like he might hate me, potentially, I'm still getting A's and B's on these essays, then maybe I'm actually pretty good at writing, because he could just fail me just because he felt like it if he wanted to. So I kept that in the back of my mind. I didn't apply it immediately, but when it was time to start applying for colleges, I enrolled in the journalism program at a school called LIU, Long Island University, in the Brooklyn campus, downtown Brooklyn, right near the Barclays Center, people who are familiar with it.
Fun fact, the Baltimore woman that introduced me to publishing also used to teach at LIU.
It's crazy. I went to the journalism program there, and when I went to orientation, I just by chance, met two people who were editors at the school paper. And I never wrote for a school paper. I didn't even do extracurricular activities really in high school. So I was just like, okay, let me step into something uncomfortable. But then at that time, I think writing, in my mind, a kid that watched SportsCenter and ESPN all day, I'm like, okay, if I'm going to be a writer, I guess I'll be a sports writer, because that's the only writers I really know about. So they had me covering women's volleyball. I didn't know anything about volleyball. I didn't know the rules. I didn't know anything, but that was my assignment. Like, you go to every volleyball match. Is it a match or a game? It's a match.
I think it's a match.
I think it's a match. You go
Any volleyball players in here? Anyway? I mean, he went to all of them and doesn't know.
I had to go to every volleyball match and just summarize what was happening. Like, I learned the rules. I don't remember them, but at that time, I was very serious about that beat. My beat was women's volleyball. And I was also had a blog spot because that was a popular thing at the time. And it wasn't focused. It was just like if some cool like sneakers came out, I would write about them. Or if a playoff game was on, I would write about it. Or like maybe a mixtape, I would write a paragraph about it. So I did that. I didn't last at LIU. I went back home after a year. And then I figured I have to figure out something. How do I join this passion for writing with, I knew music pretty well. My mother did music. My grandfather did music. And I kind of developed a reputation among friends as the person that knows a lot. Like, if you want to find a mixtape, I'm the person that will spend hours on LimeWire uncovering it. And I come to school with the mixtapes.
Or stealing it.
Stealing it. Yeah. I guess that's what it was at the time.
Uncovering is a wild word to use.
I was pirating music, and I would come to school with the mixtapes, and I would sell the mixtapes, or I would just give people mixtapes like, yo, like these are 20 songs you need to know. So I was kind of that person. So I joined those two things, and I just started going out in Baltimore and started just going to underground shows, rap shows, club music shows, and then in the underground scene in Baltimore, since it's pretty small, there was a lot of overlap. So it would be a punk band on the same bill as a rapper, same bill as a club music producer, and I kind of I just started documenting the scene, and it was some people doing it, but I don't know. I think I might have been the first out of my own peer group that joined all of those things. You had I had a cousin that was older who had a blog called The Baltimore Love Thing, but he was a really real hip hop guy. He didn't even like Gucci Mane or Boosie or any of those people that were very popular in Baltimore, but he was like, I listen to Nas, and he was that type of person. Yeah. So I'm like, okay, he's not going to cover this stuff, so I'm gonna cover like the punk music and the club music and the rap all together. And since I lived in New York for a year, that was a blessing because I think it opened my eyes to what was appealing outside of home. Yeah. So I think I learned how to write to different audiences. So not only did I cover the local music, I covered what was happening nationally, so I could get those outside eyes. And that's kind of what spearheaded everything.
Is this how True Laurel started?
That's how True Laurel started. It was a WordPress.
Where did the name come from?
My homie Abdu, who's also a writer and a performer, he had a blog called Eat On This, and it's because his last name is Eaton. So it's like, I'm going to call my blog Eat On This. You should look up what your name means, and maybe you can get a blog name. So I looked up my name, never looked it up before, and I don't even know if this is true, but it said that Lawrence comes from the laurel wreath, which if people know that's the Timberland logo. They use the laurel wreath, and like the Olympics. The laurel wreath, it symbolizes victory or triumph or whatever. I was like
the Greek halo joint. Is
exactly.
The laurel wreath.
So True Laurels was like true victory. It sounds corny as hell saying that out loud, but it was cool. Like it was me claiming success before I could
we got to do that sometimes. True Laurel, but it's like, but I mean, the explanation is corny, right? Yeah. But the name is fire. Like if you know what I'm saying, True Laurels is a fire name, man. The True Laurels is
at a point now where some people think my name is True Laurels. They think like that's my writer name. True like Laurel. People like, what's up, True? Like what's going on?
You be like,
right, that's not my name.
Like, that's not my name.
I even had somebody ask me like, are you from Laurel? Because True Laurel, from Laurel. I'm like,
you're like, I was offended. Definitely not. You know what I mean?
I was like, I'm not from Laurel. What do you mean? But yeah, that's how it all started. It was like a teacher planted a seed unknowingly.
Mr. McBee.
Yeah,
he done beat the man up, and he still was giving you A's and B's. Shout out to the fair teachers, man. Loving, compassionate teachers. You know, for sure. Give it up for your teachers. You know what I mean? I wanna I want to push the conversation forward. We got, in 10 minutes, I want to take questions, so get your questions together. You know, I'm curious, man. So you go from True Laurels, and then you start working for all these different publications. What was your favorite place? Because you got Fader, you got like all these places. But by the way, if for young writers coming up, you worked at like all the hot spots. It was like these were the places that everybody, for my generation and your generation, the generation above me was like Rolling Stone and like Double XL, Source. But for you, you worked at the pop culture sort of giants at the time. What was your favorite one to work at, and what was your favorite gig? Like your favorite assignment?
I don't know if I had a favorite because they served different purposes. Like I think Vice, I think that was probably the best first full-time media job I could ever hope for.
Did everybody remember Vice magazines? I know it's different audiences.
Yeah, they've fallen from grace recently. But.
Yeah, it's a wrap for them. But Vice magazine was like an iconoclastic, yet iconic magazine, right? They were pushing back against they were pushing back against pop culture media at the time, and you got to work with them.
So when I started working at Vice full time, I was freelancing for them from like maybe 2013, but I was hired full time as a staff writer in their music department, what was called Noisy. Got hired there in 2016, and 2016 was that year that Vice was making a big swing to become this international media conglomerate that was like focused on youth culture. So they had a lot of money. They were sending people all around the world. They launched Viceland, which was a TV channel. It was just a lot going on. So I got there at that time, which was the best time in my opinion, because they were just super open to anything, because it's like, we're just trying to expand. Let's see what sticks. And I started noticing people getting sent all around the globe to just report. So once I worked there for maybe a year, gained the confidence of my editors and executives, and then I just started pitching international stories. And before I knew it, I was jet setting. They sent me to Johannesburg to cover Afropunk when it was the first time it was outside of America, I think. Well, at least the first time on the continent. So I did that. I randomly went to Amsterdam with Ryan Leslie for a story that never came out.
Fire.
Fire. I went to Kingston to follow Popcorn around. People familiar with Popcorn as a dancehall superstar. I got to do that. It was crucial for my confidence. Yeah. And they allowed me to essentially treat. I covered everything. Like I had to like do the reviews of like the Kendrick albums and the Kanye's and the titans in music, but they told me they hired me in large part because of True Laurels. So when I went for my interview, I took my zines with me, and just kind of like laid them out on the table, and it's like this is what I do, and they wanted me to continue that work there. So when I was at Vice, I was able to essentially carve out a beat that was like just a DMV focused beat. So it was a first time that a lot of artists from our region were ever covered in an international publication, and I took a lot of pride in that. So I carved out that space for myself in the international media landscape as like, this is the Baltimore DMV guy. So I was super thankful for that. I think the Fader was more of something proven to myself, because I feel like the Fader was like the ultimate test of taste. Like they had the best taste, they had the best covers, they had the best stories,
editorials, everything.
They never
does everybody, are we all on the same page? Yeah. All right. If you don't know what the Fader is, do your Googles. But
yeah, because I feel like Vice was a rebellious publication.
Yeah.
Like they did cool things, but it was very
they had Terry Richardson shooting photographs.
Yeah,
it was all very.
It was testy.
Exactly.
It was testy. The Fader wasn't testy. It was more like if you made the Fader, you're somebody.
High taste.
Because they turned down probably my first 10 pitches. I was like, I'm not good enough to write for the Fader. Yeah. So when they approached me about a job, I just dropped everything. I left Vice immediately. I'm pretty sure I could have negotiated a better salary, but I wanted out so bad that I was like I'm going to the Fader. I don't care. I'll take it. But my favorite assignment, I would say it would probably be the Joburg assignment. I mean, honestly, like I would never, as a Black American, you just never even dream of. I mean, I think it's different now for kids, probably in the past decade or so, because social media has made the world smaller. But just as a Black person growing up in America, it's like the idea of making it back to Africa is just like so lofty of an idea that you just don't think it's going to happen. And me seizing that opportunity to do that, I felt very proud of myself. And my assignment over there was really just to talk to people my age who were essentially the first post-apartheid generation. Apartheid ended when they were babies. So they were the first people to be able to define what that looked like. So I talked to a lot of people about that, and I found a lot of parallels between the Black American experience and the Black South African experience. And I've made some long-lasting friendships from that trip. I've gone back, you know. So yeah, I would say that was my favorite.
You should be proud of yourself, bro. From like, hey man, sometimes it's amazing. It's amazing how sometimes you write your own wings, bro. It's an incredible thing to think about, that sometimes you can write your own wings. It eventually would result in this. This is Lawrence's debut collection of essays. It's fire. I would read every blurb on here, but I won't, because everybody just basically is gassing it up, saying, this is fire. There's one essay. There's a lot of essays I really love in this book, but there's one essay that I want you to talk, before we take questions, talk about. And it's the essay about crabs. So there's an essay in this book. It's summertime. We here. It's crab time for all of us. And I want you to talk a little bit about the crab essay. I think it's a brilliant take on the crab as like this cultural pillar and what it really means and what it's meant for you.
Yeah, so the title of the essay is A Love Letter to Steamed Crabs Piled on Top of a... Why am I messing up my own title? It's A Love Letter to Steamed Crabs Piled onto a Bed of Newspaper. That's the name of the essay. And it's actually the first essay I wrote for the book.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. This essay went into the book proposal. So it's gone through like multiple iterations, but essentially it's kind of broken down in 3 parts. The first part is kind of this recurring memory I have of eating crabs with my family at my grandmother's house. And it's kind of just like talking about how in this area we treat crabs as like, you know, it's such a regular thing to just get off work and be like, oh, it's 75 degrees today, let me get a half a dozen. Mm-hmm. You know, it's not always a bushel, it's not always the cookout crab. It's always just like, oh, I just feel nice today, I'm gonna bring some crabs home. Or you take the scraps and you make crab soup out of it. And it was kind of like a meditation on the tradition that's passed down generation after generation. And I took that and I looked deeper into the history, because I always think like, you know, things that we enjoy the most typically have a really complicated history. So I started looking into some things, and that's when I found out about the Seaman's Protection Certificate. And for those who aren't aware, that was a document that all people that worked on the water had in the 19th century primarily, maybe the 18th, but definitely the 19th century. But if you were a Black person that had a Seaman certificate pre-abolition of slavery, you were essentially free. So it was a really cherished get if you were a Black person. It came with status, it came with freedom. And in this region, a lot in Baltimore specifically, because Baltimore had the biggest population of freed Black people at that time, but it also had an enslaved population. So there was a lot of exchanging going on, people helping each other escape bondage. And for those that don't know, Frederick Douglass achieved his own freedom by borrowing a friend's seaman certificate, and he disguised himself in a sailor's outfit and got on the train and went up to Philly. So it was just kind of like this thing about, like, you know, we look at this crustacean as the icon of this region, but we don't know the lengths that people went for us to even have those freedoms. So that's part of the essay. And then I end the essay about a guy named Tom Miller, really renowned black artist from Baltimore, who had a mural right where I grew up when I was young, right across the street from my elementary school. But he has a piece that came out in 1994 called Maryland Crab Feast that essentially illustrates the experience that we all had. It's like a family around, it's somebody walking up to the table about to dump more crabs onto the table. It's a kid hovering around trying to get a cluster of meat because the adults won't let you pick a crab and waste it. So you gotta wait around for somebody to give you a cluster. It's a family walking by that's like jealous that they're not eating crabs. It was like this. It essentially described the scene that I started the essay with. But yeah, I would say it's definitely in my top 3 favorite essays from it.
And the way it ends is we won't spoil it, but the last line of the essay is profound. And we will leave it there. I don't want to spoil it. I want you all to experience it for yourselves. My last question before we take questions from you. I'm actually going to ask your mother. Okay. And I usually ask writers this, I'll ask you too, but I want to hear your mom because she's here and she has such a lovely voice. If you, looking back on your life with Lawrence, and let's go back to, let's say, 10-year-old Lawrence, what would you thank 10-year-old Lawrence for?
What would I thank him for?
What would you thank him for?
Honestly, I think I would thank him for being with me, for being under me. He was kind of a mama's boy, but not like pathetically mama's boy, but he was kind of a mama's boy, so I would thank him for being under me and learning from me, whether it was through the music. I introduced him to lots of music from different cultures, and they were regularly played in our house. And I think he was open to receiving it without even realizing he was taking it all in. It was just a regular thing. But now that he's an adult and he writes beautifully, those things feed his writing that he was taking in all along, and they have informed how he looks at the world and how he looks at other cultures, and I really appreciate that.
That's awesome. That's fire. I love the fact that your mother said, I'm glad that this fool let me mother him. You know what I mean? And what would you thank your 10-year-old self for?
I don't really remember 10 that tough, but
12. I know you remember high school because Mr.
12.
McBee. So
I remember
12, 13, 14.
12, 13, 14, I remember very vividly. I would say I would thank myself for, I wasn't afraid to get in trouble. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I think it allowed me to just kind of walk to my own beat, you know? Like, I think at the root of it, I was just trying to define who I was as an individual. You know, I think when you come from a super big family and people know who your family is, or you come from a neighborhood. I grew up in a neighborhood when I was young where maybe 3 of the households just within a block and a half radius. Like, I lived on the same street. My grandmother lived across the street. My aunt lived on the same block. My cousin lived around the corner. So you kind of are thought of as a person that's part of a unit. So I think once I got to that middle school age, I was really fighting to be who I am. And maybe it came out in a way that was rebellious or knuckleheaded, but no regrets.
No regrets. All right. Any questions?
First of all, Jason, thank you for gifting us with your world of your books.
I
My
appreciate
teens
that.
and I have read so many of your books.
Thank you.
Something Lawrence said really stuck with me. I wrote it down, and you said that it wasn't until college that you gave in to those desires. I remember being at college and being a science major, but my love and passion was art, and still to this day I teach public ed art. But I'm just curious, did you feel more purpose or curiosity when you gave in to those desires? Did a shift happen in your life?
Probably wouldn't say I felt purpose until maybe a couple years into doing it. I think at first it was just something I was trying out. But it did make me more. It made me more curious. It made me. It incentivized me to be more open. I would say up until the point of becoming a writer, I was probably more insulated in my friend groups and just the things that I was doing in general. But I realized in order to be a dynamic, well-rounded writer, I had to build community with people outside of my immediate comfort level or vicinity.
Good question. Anybody else? Anybody else? Got my brother back here.
Thank you. I want to thank you fellas for coming out today, first of all.
Thank you.
I'm a DC native, so this is definitely going to be from my perspective. I'm making the assumption that Baltimore is very similar. But, you know, DC being the home of the Bad Brains, the area having Rico Nasty, but also artists like Q the Fool, Glock Jones, and we also have go-go bands like UCB, Backyard. So being such of a, so much of a melting pot, and you being the voice of an area, being the voice of Baltimore, of the DMV, how do you choose what to put on that forefront? Like, is it about what's more marketable nationally, or which you more so feel in touch with? Because I know it could be a lot and you can't cover everybody, so you have to choose. So I was just wondering how you make those decisions and how you feel in general being a voice of the people. Like, how do you handle that responsibility? You know, how does that make you feel?
I mean, I'm grateful for anybody that looks at me as a voice. I don't know if I would consider myself that, but I do think that I'm very cognizant of the responsibility. And I think for the past decade or so, it's always difficult to say like why you choose to cover certain things. It's different reasons for different things, you know? Like, I think especially those days when I was like writing at Vice or the Fader, I had a greater purpose in mind that was about getting eyes and ears on what was coming out of this area, and it wasn't always about what I liked personally. You know, like I was able to look beyond what I just liked, because I feel like as a journalist, as a music journalist, you kind of toe this line of like tastemaker, but also reporter. And sometimes I wear my reporter hat, and sometimes I wear my tastemaker hat, you know? Like, I think, I'm not going to like specify artists, but I think there are artists who are just important. Whether I like them, whether I particularly love the music or not, I just think what they're doing is pivotal. You know, it's I think every couple years or so, you're able to identify artists that's like, this person is going to spearhead a whole wave of artists. And they might not be the best one, but you know that they have something that other artists are going to benefit from. So you try to put the light on that artist. But I don't know, I think I've kind of like cast a wide net for the most part. Like, I think the coverage has been pretty diverse, but when you sit in my position, it's always going to be somebody that's like, he don't like me, or he doesn't like this person, or he got a problem with this person. You know, it's like one of those things that you always are going to deal with as a music. Probably just a critic of art in general. Like, I imagine people that critique visual art have enemies, or just like people who are just upset about the things that they pick and choose. But I think I do realize the power in it. So when people are upset, I understand why they are upset, because I would be lying to say that it is a position of privilege that I sit in, being able to pick who gets covered for what.
I think it's dope when people get mad, because I mean they love something. That's fine. I mean, yeah, I don't got to get mad that you mad, but I like the fact that you love something. That's good enough. You write about it. That's what I think. You do it.
I agree.
Any other questions? Man, y'all scared of Lawrence. That's crazy. I told you he's a 5 and y'all acting like he a 10. He chilling.
I have a question for, I don't know, Jason, if you want to answer this too, but what's the most rewarding part of what you do?
I guess that I get to do it, you know? Like, I just can't believe that I'm about to have a book, like, that's in bookstores. You know, like, I think the most rewarding thing is just knowing that something that started in your head can actually manifest itself into a tangible object, and people can potentially learn from it or critique it, not be happy with it. Just that anybody could feel anything from something that I was just sitting around twiddling in my thumbs, just thinking of something to do. I think that's extremely rewarding.
Yeah, I think the same. I think this is the closest thing. First of all, let me preface this by saying it's not close at all. But this is the closest thing that I'm ever going to get to bearing a child, right? I know it's not close at all. People be ready, they be on the ready like, what? It's not close, but what I mean by that is it's like there is conception, and then and then we just kind of are like, we're like, it's just living in us for a while, and it's growing, and it's growing, and it's growing. Like there's a whole process before there's ever any words on the page, right? And it's growing, and it's growing, and it's growing. And then there's this wildly painful and discomfort moment that we put this thing into the world, or that we begin to put this thing into the world, and then it grows. And eventually it leaves us, and it moves around the world without us and forms relationships with people that we've never met. It's the wildest experience. Like, it's the wildest experience for anyone. I mean, if anybody in here who's had children, I guess you know that. But it's just, but for us, right, it's a weird thing to consider, you know. All right, next question.
This is for both of you guys, but Jason first. I've been following you for a while, and I feel like in a couple of talks, and most recently on NPR, you mentioned not being able to sleep. And I read something that said sleep requires rest, and rest requires peace. So my question is, what are you at war with?
What am I at war with?
For both of y'all.
Yeah. No, this is, you know what? You know, for me, it's a good question, and I appreciate it. You know, I think people get real, like, people be afraid of, like, the questions that's going to push you and, like, get into your business. But I'm just not one of those people, so I appreciate the question, brother. What am I at war with? The real question is, what am I not at war with? I think I'm at war with my personal expectation, right? What I expect of myself. I think I'm at war with my responsibilities. I'm a grown person, right? All the way grown, with a whole world of responsibilities and people who depend on me. And I have to pick and choose when to create boundaries, when to choose to let those people down, some of whom I really can't let down, right? Like, there's a lot I'm at war with an industry that loves me as long as I can make for it, right? I'm at war with sort of my 21-year-old self who is begging me to come back, right? Try to figure out how to find the joy I had at 21 again, but I do this for a living, been doing it for 22 years. Right? Do I still love it? Of course. Every day of my life, I'm grateful to be able to do this for a living and to be able to do this for self-excavation. Do I love it the same? No. It's impossible to love it the same when it becomes your livelihood. Right? I'm at war with my necessity for rest and the inability to get there. That is frustrating, right? And not because I can't sleep, but because my mind is so active that it just becomes a difficult thing. And the active mind is what got me here. But how do you turn off? Right? Like, we're hyperactive due to the fear of failure. Then you succeed and can't turn it off. Right? All of it sort of has me in a particular sort of conundrum, man. Like, I got 2 therapists working it out every week. Doing the best I can, brother. You know what I mean? What about you, man? What you at war with?
I mean, you said it all. I don't even know how to follow that up.
But you know what it is.
Yeah.
Like, you know what that is, what I'm talking about. Like,
no, for sure. I think, I would say definitely at war with expectations of myself, at war with, honestly, everything you said, I don't even think I could really add anything to it. It was just, I think those are the things.
I appreciate it. So when y'all judging our work, extend a little grace. It's hard to get it right, all right? All right.
We'll
We
do
got
one
time
more
for-
question, I think, before we got to wrap up.
We'll do 2 more.
Two more?
Yeah,
Two more?
because we started
Okay.
a little late. We'll do 2 more.
Excellent. Okay.
Hi, how do you, kind of piggybacking on that last question, how do you find balance in your lives? I know balance was the theme tonight.
Yeah. How do you find balance? Lawrence?
I don't know. I think, I think I try to be pretty balanced. I think I might be emotionally balanced. But in terms of just like being a productive writer, being a good partner, being a good father, a good son, brother, all those things are working and being a responsible adult. You know, I think all of those things are sometimes working in tandem and sometimes working against one another. But I think over the past couple of years I've been way better at setting personal boundaries that I don't even necessarily discuss with other people. It's just like, this is what I'm willing to do and what I'm not willing to do. And I think making peace with that, with, people are going to be disappointed with me sometimes, and that's okay. Because I think maybe for the longest time I don't want to let people down. I want to make sure everybody is accounted for as much as I can. But writing this book ended that. It wasn't possible anymore. So I think this book definitely opened the door for me to be more comfortable in setting the boundaries I need to be my best self, or at least try to work towards being it.
For me, my life there ain't no balance in my life. I used to try to figure out how to talk about it in a way to pretend like it was balanced, but it's just not. Like I don't know if, and it's not because I don't think that. I think ultimately, when someone looks at like my life from a macro level, they'll see that there's balance when you look at it on a whole. But this idea that I have some sort of daily balancing act is just not true. My life is lopsided. And there will be a time where it will lop the other way, right? Right now, I work hard, I take care of my mama, I do all the things I need to do. There's very little time for me. At some point, there will be a whole lot of time for me, and I'll sort of pour back into that well. And in the meantime, I take a little snack here and I take a little snack there, right? And I'm okay with it. I think at this point, I've come to terms with the fact that, like, this is the way your life functions. And then I researched all these people, and I'm like, this is how all your heroes' lives function. It's really hard to try to be great and balanced. Because greatness requires obsession. It requires, people look at greatness as if it's like, greatness is the most unhealthy. It is, right? It's this strange thing that's so unhealthy to look, if we really were to dig into the lives of the people we deem to be great. And so I've accepted that, like, let me just make sure I take care of myself. Right? Let me eat right and exercise. Let me go to therapy, take my medicine. Let me try to get a nap in, right? And then let me plan for a month off. Let me plan. But for now, this is what it is. And that has to be enough for me, if that makes sense, All right, last question.
And what your least favorite song?
What's my least favorite song? What's your least favorite? What you hate?
Least favorite?
He said, we want to get right to the mess. A young person said, let's get to it. What do you hate, Lawrence?
My least favorite song? There's so many bad ones. I'm not sure. Let me think. I will say that everything that Drake has put out in the past 6 months, I'm not trying to hear it right now. I think he's waited too soon to come back. I think he's fighting against himself. He's at war with himself.
He's at war.
He's at war.
That brother is at war with himself.
At war. He will not accept defeat. It's really hard to watch.
Sheesh.
So anything that Drake has put out the past 6 to 8 months, I would say.
You know what? We're going to leave it there. I want to make sure, I want to say to you, brother, I'm honored that you would sit down with me and have this conversation in front of these strangers. And I'm so proud of what you have and will contribute to American letters, to Black American letters, to journalism, to cultural criticism. Like, it means the world to this area, right? Because even though we talk about it like Baltimore is not in the region, we're all in the same region.
Yeah,
we know that the DMV and Baltimore are different, but we in the same region. We got to figure this out.
We need a new term.
It's like, this is wherever there's crabs, that should be like a certain joint. You know what I mean? Wherever the crabs is, that's a particular part, right? But I want to say, man, for all of us, I personally am grateful, but on behalf of people from here and people from Baltimore, for that matter, man, you are a lighthouse, and we're excited to see what comes next, man.
I appreciate that.
Give it up for Lawrence Burney. Thank y'all very much.
And of course, to
His mother. Give it up for Lawrence Burney's mother as well.
and for Jason Reynolds as well. Thank you so much for coming back and for the second season of Between the Lines. Please keep in mind that while this program today was free to you all, it wasn't free to produce. So please go ahead and consider making a donation so that we can continue to produce community programming like today's.